What is up, Planeswalkers? Theric6 back with some more Magic the Gathering Arena. Today we're going to continue with the Guilds of Ravnica guild mechanic upgrades, this time with the blue-red Izzet Jumpstart deck. Now, I could have gone several different directions with this deck. However, what I decided to do is try and make these upgrades something that will allow you to branch off into several paths, just like I did with the previous video. This one, what I did was essentially just add in the Shocklands and the Buddy Lands, as you see here, and I threw in 4 risk factors and 2 Ionizes. And the reason I do this is because these are cards that you are likely going to want to play if you branch off into some of the other ideas that I'll talk about in the sideboard in a bit. So I just want to talk a little bit about why I made certain changes. For example, we took out the radical ideas, and we took those out in favor of the risk factor. Now, this does mean that we are going to technically draw less in the early game, but risk factor is very strong in this style of deck where we're pressuring our opponent's life total a ton. We get a lot of value out of casting our spells, and we're running so much burn that at a certain point our opponent is damned if they do, damned if they don't. If our opponent is at 6 mana, letting us draw 3 cards is likely just going to kill them. Especially if we have an Electrostatic Field, that means 2 shocks kills them. If we have a Guttersnipe, that means, well, still 2 shocks kills them since they're 6. But, risk factor puts them in such a predicament that we could theoretically, if we just are able to chain risk factors together, just burn our opponent out of nowhere. If we have the field or the Guttersnipe out, it just makes the card even stronger because it's guaranteed damage on top of what they might need to take as well. Ionize, I decided to add in favor of, instead of the Beacon Bolts. Now, the reason I did this was Beacon Bolt essentially acted as kind of a high-end creature removal, and that's functionally what Ionize is going to be doing here. Since we don't have any more sorcery speeds other than just the creatures that we'd be playing, we aren't going to be tapped out a ton during our turn, which means that we are going to be more able to get rid of our opposing creatures that our opponents are casting. Additionally, it does come with its own value inside of it in that it deals 2 damage by itself. With a Guttersnipe, deals 4. It's just fantastic. Now, I decided on 2 because I didn't want to be playing too many counters when I would much rather just be playing burn spells. And I didn't have too many slots. Essentially, I would have taken out like Sonic Assault, but Sonic Assault is, I have found it still to be very good at mostly tapping down our opponent's flyers so we can get in with Crackling Drake. So that's why I decided to land on 2 Ionizes. As for the Shocklands and the Buddy Lands, you should try to get them as soon as you can if you know you are going to be playing blue-red based decks. Even if you're going to be playing like a Grixis deck, which is blue-red-black, or a Jeskai deck, which is blue-red-white, you're going to want these lands at some point just because of the fact that they're going to be good in every deck that you have of that color, right? Risk factor is only good in certain decks that are pressuring your opponent, whereas Sulfur Falls, if you're playing blue and red, you're going to want at least some number of Sulfur Falls. So that's why you should definitely get these as soon as you can. I'm not going to talk about all of the individual card selection. I did make the first video, the budget video about that, so feel free to check that out if you want to know why I made the deck the way I did. But here are some other cards that I did not include, and I'll go over a little bit why I did not. Firemind's Research is another kind of spell-heavy style deck, and what I would end up doing is, if I ended up playing Firemind's Research, I would probably be playing a lot more counter spells, and I wouldn't be running this creature package as it is. I maybe would still be running the Crackling Drakes, but it feels like to me a Firemind's Research deck is better with Niv-Mizzets. Take these out, throw in probably 3 of these, 3 Niv-Mizzets, keep in the Crackling Drakes, and have a few more counter spells. Taking out some other cards elsewhere as well, just because you want to kind of like sit back and rest on your Firemind's Research laurels. It's not as much about just damaging your opponent. Arclight Phoenix, I do think probably has a home in this style of deck. I just personally couldn't figure out where to put it. You could theoretically take out something like Ionize for it, maybe Sonic Assault as well. It does give you a bit more burst potential. So if potentially you're seeing Crackling Drake is just not doing enough, it's dying too often, and you just need a little bit more damage to burst your opponent, Arclight Phoenix is fine. You could theoretically just do an all-flyers deck, and you would add in Enigma Drakes, which I realize I should show you what it is, because not everyone knows what all of the cards are. So you could add in Enigma Drakes. as well as Crackling Drakes and the Arclight Phoenixes, and then play just nothing but, burning counters, and have all your creatures be flying. They're a lot harder to deal with because Arclight Phoenix comes back. The 2 Drakes have 4 toughness, which means they don't die to lightning strike. So you could go that route. I just didn't, and I didn't want to change the deck up too much compared to the budget version, especially if people crafted for those cards. So that's why I went with that. Ralzeric. Ralzeric's a good card. However, I think very similar to these last cards, it just is better in a deck that is hoping to push the game long. And what this deck is doing right now is we're trying to make the game as short as we can. We are trying to just burn our opponent to dead. And Ralzeric doesn't technically do that. Ralzeric is a card that will get you a lot of value later in the game. It's a card that gives you, card advantage. It removes creatures, but it doesn't have the goal of burn our opponent to death. Like, I would rather draw a shock on turn 5 than a Ralzeric in this style of deck. Niv-Mizzet is probably good enough to still be in a deck that wants to be this aggressive. But I still think it's just a little bit too much of a late game card. Like, you could justify Niv-Mizzet in this style of deck, but Niv-Mizzet is just better in a control-y deck or in a more mid-rangey style deck. You could even, instead of running the Phoenixes and Firemind's researches, if you do have a Niv-Mizzet, since it's only a rare and not a mythic, you could just run the same style of deck with Arclight Phoenix, except the 2 Drakes and Niv. I'd probably run 2 Nivs in that case, just because you are still going to want to have a relatively low curve, but you would just be running a bunch of burn, a bunch of draw spells, and Niv-Mizzets and some Drakes, and you just kill your opponent by attacking in the skies. Yeah, I mean, he's a real good card. Really annoying for your control opponent to deal with, but control tends to not do great against us just because our creatures aren't that, they just let them live for too long, and we just burn them to death over the course of the game, and it's difficult for them to deal with. Banefire is a card that I tried to squeeze in the deck as a one-of, because of the fact that it just kills people out of nowhere. Sometimes we do Flood, and being able to top deck a Banefire and just have an uncounterable X-Spell to your opponent's dome, it's pretty good, but I wasn't able to squeeze it in. I tried to have 23 lands, but you really do want the 24th just to guarantee you're hitting your land drops. And as I said in the initial budget video, if you have too many, you can just throw them down to jumpstart. So Banefire, I just barely wasn't able to squeeze it in, but if you have it, I suggest testing for it because it might just help you against certain matchups. Expansion Explosion is another card that I wanted to talk about because it is getting a lot of hype right now. I think it is better in the more control-y decks that really want to take the game super late. Yes, you could technically live the dream and risk factor expansion, or maybe you flood out and you have Explosion, but if you're flooding out, you'd rather reduce your lane count or just increase your Banefire count. I'm not a big fan of Expansion Explosion in this specific style of deck because we want to be fast. Now, like I've been doing in the previous videos, I'm going to go to the event. And I'm doing the event, 1, to grind gold, and 2, because it really shows people how the deck does in an environment where you're not matched up against your deck strength. So in free play, your deck strength is paired with your actual rank, and that's how your matches are chosen. Whereas here, it's just based on your win record. So the first one I think might deal with your deck strength, but I'm not sure. Going up against J-Bells here. It might, but I'm not sure. I don't think it is. But it's just pretty much just match record. So we'll see how we can do. The game has been kind of slow recently, which is frustrating. This is a bad hand. We have 5 lands. We do not want 5 lands. Ooh. So I'm going to keep this, and here's why. We're going second, which means we get to draw a card, which means technically we have one more card in our hand, kind of. We are also going to get to scry, and we do have an opt. We're not going to be able to play opt on turn 1 because this is going to come in tapped, but we do have the opt if we need it. So I'm going to keep this because this style of deck... Oh, and that's perfect. This style of deck really doesn't want to go down too much on cards. Legion's Landing, that's a good card for our opponent. Good lead off. This deck does gain life, and it's very frustrating for us. So it's possible... Then I'm just going to need to shock something here. We will take the damage first because our opponent might be playing something better on 2. Let's see what they play. Another Legion's Landing. Ooh. Did our opponent keep a 1-land hand? No, okay. We will... Will we shock? I don't think we'll shock. I think we're going to opt. Do I take another Steam Vents? Yeah, I think I'm fine taking another Steam Vents. I really want to be able to get up to the 3 mana zone. Alright, well. And I'm just going to play the Steam Vents tapped. Because we only really need to shock here, so. The fact that our opponent's going to gain life is a little worrisome, but hopefully it's not going to matter too much. Yeah, shut up. I will eat the damage. That's a little frustrating, but we're just going to go ahead and kill one of these now. Could have technically saved some damage, but we weren't sure whether or not our opponent was going to have something to play here, so. They did miss their third, so this Lightning Strike on the Boros Challenger is going to be pretty good. Now, obviously, we would prefer to have Guttersnipe out first, but we don't want them to get value here, and we're actually just going to kill this now. I believe Red-White has a card that gives a creature indestructible. That might be Green-White. No, it's Green-White. I'm thinking of the wrong card. But, okay, sure. So our opponent is missing land drops. We'll be able to land our Guttersnipe here. Okay, they got another land. And we are just flooding out a little, which is unfortunate. They're going to be able to flip their Legion's landing. But I can start risk factoring. Ooh, War Boss is bad. I'm going to be able to block here. That said, my opponent does have white available. It is going to be pretty bad if my opponent... Oh, they kept that up. That's interesting. Ionize... I mean, this is instant, so we're fine just casting it end of turn. But yeah, as I was saying earlier, the deck really requires a certain glut of cards. Yeah, how about no? And they'll take 2 more. Go away. Don't you dare try and kill my Guttersnipe. So I assume my opponent is going to attack with the War Boss as well. Oh, nope, they're content to keep doing this, and I'm fine with that. I am happy that they're not placing more pressure on us. That's unfortunate, but technically fine. The field is great here. Field is great. Field means we can get a little bit more value. Do I risk factor now? I'm going to risk factor now. I do assume my opponent's just going to take 4. But as you can see, like, they took an additional 3 on top of it, which is very nice. We are relatively low, and that's unfortunate. However, our opponent is on a relatively small amount. I'm going to just pass the turn here. I don't need to play this land. I'd rather use it for risk factor. As long as my opponent can't kill us, we should be more or less okay. So that's pretty good for them. I can just jump block this all day. I assume War Boss is going to attack, and Challenger is going to... Yep. So War Boss is probably going to buff the 1/1 with lifelink. The Challenger is going to buff the War Boss. Yeah, these Boros decks are real strong. Fun fact. This style of deck definitely preys on control decks a little bit more, because other aggro decks are more aggressive. We tend to prefer decks that are... Oh! That's not what I expected at all. Because now I can just kill the War Boss. Oh, I see. So they recognize that this game is potentially going to go down to burn. So I think my opponent was correct here. I think it was correct to try and gain as much life as possible. And I pretty much had to kill the War Boss there. Sonic Assault is okay. I can Sonic Assault this. I think I have to Sonic Assault this, block this, take 3, go to 1. Yeah, we're not in a great way here, unfortunately. Not really a point in playing the mountain because we won't have a card in hand to jumpstart, and we'd rather be able to jumpstart next turn. So I guess we're gonna have to do this. We're hoping that our opponent buffs the Challenger. So yeah, they just go here. I think the correct decision still is to tap this down, because if I choose to tap something else, my opponent will be able to respond and buff the Challenger. Then the Challenger attacks, makes one of these larger. I block this and I die. So fairly certain I have to hit the Challenger here. They attack with all. I go to 1. We're in a rough way, but this deck isn't really aimed to beat Boros. I'm sure you could style it to... Oh, that's not good. So yeah, we're basically dead. Our opponent had too good of a hand. We can see if we can try and burn them out. It's a long shot. In fact, I don't actually think it's possible. No, yeah. Very unfortunate, but yeah, I'm absolutely dead. Darn. Oh well. I'm sure you could modify the deck to beat Boros a little bit better, but right now the deck's main strengths are against green decks and control decks. So we have two good matchups. Like when I say two, I don't mean like literally two specific decks. I mean against the mid-rangey decks that don't pressure us fast enough, we're pretty good. Against the control decks that don't pressure us fast enough, we're pretty good. The deck is just kind of folds to super wide aggro. If it was a little bit more like battle cruiser, which means one creature mattered more, then it would be a little easier because we could just remove those singleton creatures. Like the Ajani decks, the Ajani Pridemate decks, usually we're able to burn them before they get a chance to get out of control, and that really cripples them. So against those style of aggro decks, it's pretty good. Yo, Arena. Ooh, our opponent mulliganed real quick. This hand is good. A little bit too much land, but we do have double Lightning Strike to deal with any early aggression if our opponent is aggressive. And we do have an opt to draw into something better, so I think that's fine, especially since our opponent did mulligan to 6. 54, okay. Inscribe to the bottom, okay, that's good for us. That needs to die. Yeah, unfortunately I can't do anything about it this turn. But this is the blue deck that is more similar to Battlecruiser in that they're going to try and put a enchantment onto it, and sure, that's fine, and draw a bunch of cards with it. So we're gonna go and like try to not let that happen. Risk factor is great. Risk factor is just damage. Drawing too many lands, which is hilarious because I've been drawing too few lands. We're just gonna pass the turn. Our opponent could easily have a counterspell here. This style of deck typically does run counterspell, so we want them to tap down a little bit before we end up doing anything. And we are fine taking some damage. Yeah, that's fine. It's only 1 damage. So we are going to try and kill this end of their turn. And it looks like they do have a counterspell, which I would expect. Sure. But notice our opponent is down to 3 cards. An Ionize, which is good for us. And I think I'm just going to hold up Ionize. I'm fine taking 1 damage here. It's not enough pressure for me to care. If our opponent tries to cast something frightening, then I can Ionize it. If they don't, I'm just going to risk factor, probably. It'll only deal 4. Yeah, I think risk factor is still fine. Because it's just going to deal 4. I can do the same thing next turn where I hold up Ionize and then risk factor discarding one of my many lands. So I do think this is probably fine. Yeah. And I got another risk factor. And this is kind of what I was saying. You can just like chain the crap out of risk factors, and like this is 12 damage in our hands, right? So our opponent can't really just keep ignoring the card draw. Like at some point they have to let me draw cards, and at that point they're just like going to die. Chart a Course. Do I care about Chart a Course? No, I would. They might have Tempest Djinn, and I would rather counter a Tempest Djinn. That card can be a little bit more frustrating. So, all right. So I will just go ahead and cast the risk factor. Do I want to cast the one from hand? It could get syncopated. So I think I would rather cast the one from exile. I don't think that these decks are playing syncopate, but that is something that you want to take into account, what types of counterspells your opponents might be playing. And losing extra stuff from a syncopate would be pretty bad. So yeah. And we have another Ionize, which is nice. I am just going to go and play this island, because that will allow us to play a 3-drop and that Lightning Strike. So, I mean, we have functionally 8 damage. It's pretty good. Our opponent can't... Like, if our opponent casts something, right, they go to 10. They're functionally at 7 with Lightning Strike. At that point, like, they're really going to be in trouble of these risk factors, right? Like, risk factor is such an incredibly strong card in this matchup. But as you can see, the only reason we're able to do this is because our opponent's not pressuring us enough. We just don't care about what our opponent's trying to do. We'll cast Tempest, or we'll try and counter Tempest Djinn. It might resolve, but at this point, it might be too little too late. Right? They might counter this. They get a Tempest Djinn, which has, what, 6 power? Nope, and they don't get it. And I'm trying to decide if I want to strike their face, and I think I do. I think we just have such a lead on them damage-wise that even if they start drawing cards, I just don't care. There's an argument for playing the Mountain here. And the argument is being able to Ionize and Risk Factor. So I think I'm going to. Yeah, I think I want to be able to Ionize and Risk Factor. Like, if our opponent goes to 3... Sure, this is fine. So yeah, I mean, if our opponent goes to 3, then we cast it again. They have to give us cards. And there's so many ways we just burn our opponent to death. Tempest Djinn, Ionize. So either this resolves and they go to 5. But it doesn't look like it's going to resolve. That's fine with me. Risk Factor. Yeah, I mean, they pretty much have to do that. We have Guttersnipe. Guttersnipe's pretty good. I can Guttersnipe Opt. Putting them to 5. Yeah, I do think the correct decision is to play Guttersnipe here. Especially with Lightning Strike. Does that just kill them? I think it does, right? Because this is 1, 2, 3, 4. Yep, this is lethal. We do have enough mana, as you can see. So we're just going to Lightning Strike their face. And Opt. And they're dead. This is exactly the type of thing that we would like to go against. Something that cannot pressure us enough that we're able to just burn them to death over the course of the game. I really hope that that showed the value of Risk Factor, right? That card is so good. Arena, for some reason, is just being uncooperative and slow. Good old Arena. You may have noticed that this deck came out not in the order that I posted the original decks. I was able to upgrade this one. Some of the upgrades are more expensive than the other ones. The Selesnya deck in particular has, like, if you want to make it right, it has several mythics. You're probably going to want 3 Tristani. You're probably going to want 3 or even 4 Mulch of the Multitudes. So that's a lot of mythics there. Imara is really good in that deck. Venerated Loxagon is really good in that deck. So there's a lot of rares that you want for that Convoke deck. So that one is going to be a slow. This hand is okay. And the reason it's okay is we have a 1 and a 2 removal spell. If we can get more lands, that'd be great. And we do have Chemister's Insight. Our opponent on blue-black is very good for us. Kind of implies that they are control. If they're the discard-based control deck, then it might be kind of bad. If they're the disinformation campaign deck, then that might be bad, but... And I think I saved the shock. I don't think I need to just shock them willy-nilly. I think it's better to wait until I'm able to land something like a Guttersnipe or an Electrostatic Field just to get a little bit more value. Your spells need to go a long way against control just because they're necessarily going to be playing some things. So that's frustrating. We can, luckily, just discard Chemister's Insight. And I'm just going to opt. I'm just going to opt. I think it's fine. We'll keep another shock. I think keeping shock on top's fine. But yeah, we can pretty easily just discard Chemister's Insight here. Resolve that. And we'll just shock them. Since we have 2 shocks, I'm fine doing that. And we will play this. Pass the turn. Our opponent likely to cast Thought Erasure here. Bounces back to campaign. Makes us discard our best card. Probably Crackling Drake. Once again, I think we just discard the Chemister's Insight. Then we can shock Lightning Strike them, and then Crackling next turn. Jeez, I can totally speak words. And then after that, we can potentially just get stuff with our Chemister's Insight. Sure. Yeah. So the reason we're doing this is to give our our Drake more damage when it comes out. Guttersnipe. Guttersnipe's fine, but I would rather play the Drake. It also replaces itself, so if our opponent does decide to remove it, we're not getting too much value loss. Sonic Assault, not great in this matchup, unless our opponent does play the Doom Whisper. I keep having to think about Doom Whisper and Dream Eater, so I actually would love if our opponent played that here. Eldest Reborn. Ooh. Did not expect that. That's fine. And we are just going to keep playing our lands here. We're going to lose our Sonic Assault, which is fine. But we're just going to play a Guttersnipe. That's a discard of Sonic Assault, which is kind of barely a discard. But most likely going to Chemister's Insight next turn. Guttersnipe looks like it's going to die. Oh, that's rude. Yeah, that's fair. But at this point, we pretty much just have to cast everything we can as soon as we cast it, just because of Disinformation Campaign. Our opponent might get back Crackling Drake, but it only counts theirs, so it'd be like a 1/1. So I don't think it matters that much. It also turns on our Sonic Assault. So I'm just going to pass the turn. I can do this instant speed, so I want to do it at the end of my opponent's turn. I want to make sure I'm able to get my value out of it, but I assume they're getting Drake. I think they should get... I guess it draws them a card, yeah. I was going to say they maybe should get Guttersnipe and put more pressure on me, but it does draw them a card, so. But I can start Sonic Assaulting this. Thought Erasure. Sure. So they're going to bounce the campaigns, but I have only an island, so they can't get rid of that. If they cast a campaign, then I can Chemister's Insight in response. And I only discard one. I do believe that they played a land. I do believe they played that Sulfur Falls this turn. So they can only cast one. There are still 15. But this deck has the potential to burst them down. I'm going to cast this now. See if it resolves. Yo, this arena needs to calm down. Ooh, I get a Crackling Drake of my own. I'll go ahead and discard this mountain. Play my Drake. Opponent has a lot of cards in hand, unfortunately, but that is just the style of the deck. Opponent could very well have an Essence Scatter here, which would be pretty bad. Ooh, looks like they do. Ah, they didn't. Awesome. So we're going to get to draw a card as well, which is nice. Electrostatic Field. Cool. Unfortunately, I don't think the field's like ever going to come into play. So I do believe the Drake is going to die relatively soon, but we are able to block their Drake. Let's see. I assume the Drake is going to die, just because I don't have very many creatures in the deck, and Grixis Control does have a decent suite of removal spells. Also, we're fighting Krendel. I don't know if I said his name, or their name. I have no idea. 6 cards, I know one of them. Opponent really going in the tank here. If they attack, I'm probably not going to block. I don't really have a reason to. It would open me up to, like, my creature dying to shock. I don't need that. My Drake is more valuable than theirs. That can resolve, sure. I'm going to respond to the trigger. And see what I have in this opt. I'm going to draw that and discard the mountain. Alright, opponent. Still on 5 mana. 6 cards. The deck does run removal. Opponent starting to run out the clock. There's the removal. All right. Ow. Let's see. So what I'm probably going to do is play the field here, and then Sonic Assault them on upkeep. I don't trust Arena, so I'm going to do this. I'm going to also do this. Yeah, I just don't trust it. Okay, so before they draw, as you can see, it says draw. I'm going to Sonic Assault this. And I can turn this off now. Yep, cool. Get some ping damage. Get some 2 damage on them. We're pretty much just waiting until we're able to chain together some risk factors. Which is unfortunate, because our opponent is taking more time than I would like. Cool. And we do have basically no resources left, unfortunately. That is kind of the name of the game against this style of deck. Didn't expect the Ral.
Think you can beat me? You're welcome to try.
He only has 3, right? Yeah, he only has 3. I would love if they -3. I'm gonna keep like doing this. Maybe my opponent will do it. I doubt it though. Okay, nope. There's +1. Get some value.
What the wind blows in.
Alright, opponent. Playing cards. Taking forever. Thank you. That's unfortunate. We will once again just Chemister's Insight at the last second. You could argue that we could do it now, but they're only getting 1 more card, potentially. And they had Sinister Sabotage open. Second verse, same as the first, I see. The only difference is that this turn they are going to be able to double Disinformation Campaign. So I'm not even sure I want to get rid of Chemister's Insight. I'll almost certainly like be forced to discard both cards. 36, 38. Yeah, I think I just let this happen. I'm not sure if that's correct. The Disinformation style control deck, as you can see, does hurt this deck a lot, just because we want to hold a bunch of cards in our deck and then like burst them down. But sure, doesn't mean we could theoretically kill this with a top deck Lightning Strike. But now they have Drake to pressure us. It's kind of bad. That is very unfortunate that we keep drawing lands. That's interesting. They're doing that just to gain life, which I think is fair. I think it's probably a good play on our opponent's part. Also does increase the Drake's clock.
The search for the unknown.
If our opponent puts 1 more spell into the library by next turn, they are going to be able to 2-hit us. But spell didn't go in here, so that's fine. I'd assume that they can only do 1, so I will try and cast this now. Might even get countered. I wouldn't be surprised if our opponent countered this here. Nope, decided to let it go. And we discard a land. A lot of lands in a row. I think that also... I mean, like, look at that. Bunch of lands in a row, unfortunately. Wow, that's a lot worse than I expected it to be. That doesn't help. You know, against... Like, if we were drawing not lands against the discard deck, I don't think it'd be nearly as bad, just because of the fact that we wouldn't care. Because we would just burn them at instant speed, but we just... not been drawn great. An Ionize is not going to help. We are dead. Our opponent is going to be able to put another instant or sorcery in the graveyard and kill us with our own Crackling Drake.
Choose wisely, because the other one's going bye-bye.
They put a Boros in instead. They like have to cast... I mean, the thing is, like, no matter what they cast, it goes to the graveyard. Like, even if I Ionize. Why are you not killing me, though? They contempt their own Planeswalker. I mean, yeah. We unfortunately died. I'm not sure if we could have done anything different. I think... Ironically, I think keeping that land earlier in the game kind of screwed us, because it just meant we flooded out a bit. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm gonna throw another game in. I know a lot of people don't like the longer videos, but this deck's fun. I would prefer it if Arena loaded faster. There we go. Ask and you shall receive. Going against that Sniper J. This is a fine hand. We are going first. We have Opt. We have some value. All we need to get with the Opt is a land. We want like one more land and we're good. So I will keep this. It's potentially greedy, but we are kind of gun shy after last game. See what colors our opponent's on. Black something? Alright, this looks like the green-black deck, since they are led with the Memorial to Folly. Hey look, it's an island. Go ahead and keep that on top. And now, I regret keeping it on top. Look at... if we just draw like nothing but lands for the rest of the game, it's gonna suck. But, hopefully that's not the case. Let's see if our opponent plays a turn 2 Glowspore Shaman, or potentially... Alright, maybe they're like on mono black or something. What we're going to do here is we're just going to hold up mana for an Ionize. Yeah, we're just going to hold up mana for an Ionize. We could also just risk factor end of turn, which is why this is still a fine play. Our opponent's likely just going to take the damage, which we're fine with. But we want to stumble our opponent a bit, and let's go ahead and just do that. And honestly, I think we might Drake early here. Early Drake could be pretty bad again, for our opponent, just being able to pressure their life total a bit in the air. Got a Lightning Strike, so the next turn, we could Electrostatic Field and Lightning Strike something that they play. So, this is fine. This also survives against a Vraska, the Golgari Queen. Chupacabra does not survive against. That's fine. If we get a land, we can Guttersnipe into Strike. We did get a land, so we can Guttersnipe into Strike. Yep, just make sure our mana is good. I'm trying to decide if I would prefer to kill this now or wait till our opponent's turn, and I think I would rather wait. We can do it in response, so we're pretty much always going to get the trigger, and I just want to make sure that we don't make something cheaper for our opponent. Supplier, sure. Supplier might make things cheaper. I'm not a big fan of Elvish Rejuvenator in this style of deck. I actually think I like District Guide a little bit better, but what do I know? Necrotic Wound, incredibly rude. We'll go ahead and kill the Chupacabra here. Deal a little bit extra damage to our opponent while keeping stuff off their board. Yep, so this gets exiled, which is fine. We weren't planning on getting it back. And now we can just start risk factoring the hell out of our opponent. So we have this down. If they try to do something to it, we can risk factor. We have more risk factor. Discard some things to risk factor. As you can see, we really do like lean on the strength of this card. Going to keep checking our opponent's graveyard. They are a graveyard deck. We want to make sure that we aren't getting bamboozled by anything. I'm surprised by the Necrotic Wound. I'm still not convinced by this card. I feel like it's better just to run more conventional removal that is more or less guaranteed to kill things. But, I mean, there's no lying that when you have Stitcher Supplier and Glowspore Shaman, you can get the Necrotic Wound pretty fast. A Plague Crafter would be kind of bad because we would lose some of our cast value. If they put something on top, so they're almost certain to have Izoni in their hand. Almost certainly. Like, there's no other reason they would need 6 mana here, because Molderhawk has 5, so it'd be 7 minus 5, so it'd be 2, it'd be 4 mana. So Molderhawk they can cast is almost certainly just Izoni, and we don't want them to have an Izoni because Izoni lets them gain life. I assume they're going to take the 4. He said with bated breath. Yep. Got a shock, which is very nice. I guess we just pass. Yeah, we just pass. We can shock and risk factor whenever we would like. We could have theoretically risk factored first, but our opponent wasn't going to give us a card, and here's the Izoni. Or maybe Vraska? It could be Vraska Relic Seeker. That's another 6-drop card that these green-black mid-range decks like to play. Yeah, could be that. It's a find broker. Find broker into what? Another supplier? Our opponent might be greedy here. I don't... Oh, they just needed double green. Okay, that's why. Okay, so they don't necessarily have an Izoni. They just needed the double green. Let's see what they get. They get a Chupacabra. That is fine with me. They can't play it this turn, which means I'm going to get some sweet value here. Our opponent can attack for 1, functionally. I'll block the Glowspore Shaman. And I will risk factor. Down to 10. They might have to go down to 6. I can risk factor some more. So as you can see, against the green-black decks, they just don't put on enough pressure, and we're able to just make their life kind of awful. Like, they're down to 3. They literally can't take this risk factor. Why would you ever tap like that? There we go. They literally have to draw us a card. Or let us draw 3 cards, excuse me. And the chance of those cards being lethal on our opponent is pretty high. Hey, look! We drew lethal on our opponent. You're dead now. We could have BM'd and, like, played the mountain, lightning struck one of their creatures, and then shocked one of their creatures to have them die to Electrostatic Field, but we don't need to BM. Cool. All right. 2 and 2. I think that's reasonable. I think that showcases the deck a bit. But we really want to just face opponents that aren't going to murder us really quickly or make us discard our entire hand. I did forget about that. We got a mythic, and I didn't get to see what it was. That's fine. That's totally fine. We're going to open a pack, though. I am saving up gold to keep running through these, but we're going to open a Dominaria pack. Why not Guilds of Ravnica? I have a lot of Guilds of Ravnica stuff, and I just want to open some Dominaria cards. Hey, look. It's a rare. It's any rare we want. It's any rare we've ever needed. All right. I'd like to thank Izemode, Dizzyfam, Radberry, Keocean, crap. I think that's what he said his name was. Ox, Daniel, Flowerchild, Chow083, Zaraga for their fantastic support over on Patreon. If you would like to join them in supporting the channel, you can find the link to that in the description below. I hope you guys enjoyed this upgraded deck. If you did, go and tap that like button, add a subscription to our mana pool, and cast a comment to the comment section down below. And until next time, all will be one.